A child gave Kennedy a hand-drawn flaga. His speech that day changed history. The crowd had already begun to thicken on the university lawn when the moment unfolded. A quiet, almost invisible, yet powerful enough to echo through decades. Reporters adjusting their microphones didn't see it. Secret Service agents focused on their perimeters didn't see it. But one small hand, trembling with courage, pushed its way through the forest of adults and reached toward the President of the United States. In that hand was a sheet of paper, wrinkled from nervous fingers, filled with uneven red and blue crayon strokes forming a child's version of the American flag. President John F. Kennedy stopped. He looked down, and in that instant, something in his expression softened, almost melted, as if the weight on his shoulders shifted just enough for a breath of hope to slip in. That image of Kennedy pausing, bending toward a child who believed in him was forgotten by history for decades, buried in boxes of unsorted photographs and early staff interviews. It resurfaced only recently when archivists at the Kennedy Presidential Library uncovered a strip of film negatives dated May 1963. The rediscovered shots, paired with recordings of former aides, have reignited interest in an event that many now believe influenced one of Kennedy's most resonant speeches. The child in the photograph is Emily Price, 7 years old at the time, accompanying her mother to what was supposed to be a brief public appearance during Kennedy's visit to Washington, D.C. Her mother recalled the day in a 1998 community interview. Emily had insisted on bringing the drawing she'd made the night before, an American flag with wobbly stripes, blue stars like tiny bursts of optimism, and the words for the president written in shaky pencil at the bottom. Emily had told her mother she wanted the president to know that kids were counting on the grown-ups to fix things. It was a simple message from a child living in an era of uncertainty. The Cold War loomed over the nation. Nuclear anxieties shaped daily life. Civil rights tensions simmered. Every presidential appearance was shadowed by urgency. Kennedy arrived that morning with the speech in his jacket pocket, the one that aides describe as careful, diplomatic, and calculated to avoid controversy. But something in Emily's drawing seemed to strike him. According to former aide Michael Harrington, whose resurfaced audio interview has become central to this renewed historical interest, Kennedy slipped the drawing into his breast pocket and stood quietly for a moment before heading to the podium. He read it like it was the first hopeful thing he'd seen all week, Harrington recalled. Then he said, very softly, "We owe them better than fear." And right then, he changed his opening remarks. Reporters noticed the difference immediately. Kennedy's prepared drafts, released years later, lacked the emotional urgency that poured through his voice that day. When he stepped up to the podium, his tone was not simply presidential, it was personal, almost intimate, as though he were speaking not to the crowd before him but to the generations that would follow. "No child," he said, glancing briefly at the pocket where Emily's drawing rested, "should grow up under the shadow of choices made without hope." That line did not appear in any known draft. What followed was a speech historians later described as a turning point for a minute's policies, yet unusually rich in human perspective. Kennedy called on Americans and world leaders alike to imagine the consequences of inaction not through political strategy, but through the eyes of ordinary families. He emphasized responsibility, cooperation, and courage not merely as national virtues, but as daily commitments owed to those who would inherit whatever was left behind. The challenges Kennedy faced in 1963 were immense. His administration was still navigating the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Global tension surged, with each diplomatic misstep carrying the potential for catastrophic consequences. At home, civil rights battles demanded moral clarity and political boldness. It was a year defined by both hope and instability, and Kennedy's speeches often walked the tightrope between idealism and practicality. But something shifted that day, aides said. The child's flag served as a reminder that leadership was not only about managing crises, it was also about shaping the emotional and moral direction of the country. Harrington later described Kennedy's mood after the event as lighter but more focused, as though the drawing had distilled his responsibilities into something vivid and immediate. He kept it on his desk for weeks, Harrington said. It wasn't decoration, it was a message. For decades, This moment remained absent from most historical accounts. The photograph capturing the exchange never made it into newspapers. The staff recordings discussing it were stored, mislabeled, and forgotten. It was only when archivists digitized a collection of old negatives earlier this year that the story began to re-emerge. The images sparked immediate attention as shared widely online, analyzed by historians, and embraced by viewers struck by the tender simplicity of a child reminding a president of his purpose. Emily Price, now in her 70s, was shown the photographs during an interview last month. She paused for a long moment before speaking, her voice soft but steady. "I never expected him to see me," she said. "I just wanted him to remember that kids believe things can get better." I think he did. In a time when global uncertainty once again weighs heavily on public consciousness, the resurfaced memory has resonated deeply. It serves as a reminder that leadership can be shaped by moments that are small, almost invisible at the time, yet powerful enough to change the tone of history. A hand-drawn flag made of crayons and hope may not rewrite policy, but it can remind a leader, any leader, of what truly matters. And sometimes, that is enough to change everything.